right, I've got way more questions than we have time for, so I'm just going to ask one more quick one before we turn it to the audience, so start collecting your thoughts. But I think one thing that would be most beneficial to hear from with these kind of veterans of the relationship is, as we're at this consequential moment where we need to rebuild, what are the blind spots that each of us needs to account for? Where do each of our sides most get the other wrong, typically? And again, I'm sorry, Ram, I've put you in a tough spot here, but I'll just throw, you can start if you like. But
the biggest problem right now I see is with respect to trust element. You know, there was reference to Trump 1.0. I still remember so vividly the kind of bonhomie that existed between the two regimes, two governments. So much so that when 2020 elections came, there were guys in India who were praying for Trump's victory by worshipping his photographs and going to temples and praying for his victory. You go to those people today, ask them whether what they will say. Totally different. So we have somehow a big lack of mutual trust today. We need to build that trust once again. I agree that greater engagement should happen, and there are many areas where we can probably work together. I think biggest blind spot, biggest challenge in this relationship today is with respect to mutual trust. I will leave it at that.
Great, Elizabeth.
Happy to come in. I think trying to unpack this notion of trust is worth doing. And even just how the two sides understand and build and define trust, right? That is a conversation that at Stimson we've tried to convene over the years, and I think it's been helpful. But as I see it, really, there's a mutual misreading of constraints in the U.S.-India relationship that isn't unique to this relationship, but I think is a key feature that I've seen over time, which is each side has a tendency to see the other's limits as choices, but their own limits as necessities. And so you assume more flexibility on the part of the other than you yourself enjoy. And so for Washington, I would say this means overreading its own ability to persuade New Delhi to see the world as it does and to incentivize it to align with US objectives. But then on the Indian side, to overestimate the US tolerance for decisions to run counter to US strategic interests and US patience with slow implementation and limited follow-through. And I think that that is, again, not unique to this relationship, but as we find ourselves in a moment where we are needing to do some stock taking and some rebuilding, having a clear conversation and a candid conversation on where those genuine mutual interests are, where we're not trying to kind of make the other what we want it to be, but where we're genuinely working together on a similar objective, start there and use those very limited sprints as a way of rebuilding some of this trust, which is a much broader project, I think.
But where have we lagged behind? We agreed to stop buying oil from Iran. We agreed to stop buying oil from Russia, facing so much criticism from our Indian opposition. We agreed for 50% tariffs. Agreed means we did not say anything. We maintained our patience. 50% tariffs we agreed. Today, in the new trade deal also, we agreed for 18% tariffs, higher than what it used to be. I mean, average tariff. So where is India lagging behind in that? What are those issues that where India is not doing enough?
That's a big question. Briefly, I know earlier today, for example, we got into some of the history of the civil nuclear agreement. And I think some of the expectations on both sides that in some ways have, but in some ways haven't been met and took certainly a long time to get there, right? That's one example of this. In defense as well, you can see where I think the point really is how much friction is involved in making this progress, and do the two sides share a similar sense of urgency here? And what pace are we able to work at? Some of this as well is just our different systems. Kurt alluded earlier to the continued challenges of trying to figure out where those right nodes are to really push forward on projects and build momentum. And I think when you get towards this moment where we don't have the same level of top cover and top down push that we've had in the relationship, what I see is more examples where that friction can creep in and when things slow down. And this is a moment where, you know, it feels like at times the whole world is on fire and there are so many different priorities. And so the easier the two sides can make it to do business together and to get those wins, the more realistic it's going to be.
Just one quick thing. That's a great exchange between my two colleagues up here. I will say I found, I know many of you have read Jaishankar's great book, The Indian Way, and what's fascinating about it, he wrote that thinking he would not be coming back to power. But you know, we all have conceptions of ourselves that maybe others may have a different perception of it. What's striking about the book in so many different ways, he depicts in India as profoundly realpolitik, unemotional, strategic, Vulcan almost like in its ability to maneuver internationally. It's not just the ability to operate in a multipolar environment, but a dispassion that I think is completely wrong. And I will tell you, I think I have at least a little bit of experience, not as much as many people in the room here, but I think the deep little secret of U.S.-India relations is that it has come much further, and deep down, both countries were thinking and anticipating that this would be the dominant relationship going forward. And even though I completely agree with my colleagues on the panel here that India has managed this very effectively, but for the United States to to acknowledge what has happened, we need to realize that this has caused a deep hurt that is well disguised, but a deep, profound hurt among Indian friends. And it's not a strategic issue. It is a personal hurt that I sense in almost all my relationships. And if we don't understand that and acknowledge it on some level, it will be difficult to find strategic remedies to what ails us over the last couple of years.